A monumental shift in the way our society functions is happening. It's been building for hundreds of years, but today, with the breakthrough of blockchain technology, we can see a crucial tipping point coming. By looking at our history as a civilization and examining some of the ways in which blockchains can solve fundamental problems in our society, I'm going to present my case to you for why we are in the midst of a macro-level transformation that is going to impact your life in a significant way. First, briefly about me. Thank you for the great intro, Christoph. I've had the great pleasure of working with some talented teams. I've built a couple of tech companies, one which sold for 8 figures. I've been researching Bitcoin since 2012, been investing in crypto since 2013, and most recently I started Immutable Capital, which is a crypto fund that researches, develops, and invests in technologies that cultivate decentralized prosperity. This slide is so that none of you can sue me. Okay, so today I'm going to be covering 4 key points. First is that a re-decentralization movement is happening. Second, that our digital lives will drastically change as a result. Third, the very society that we live in will fundamentally change as well. And fourth, it's going to be awesome. So let's jump into this core concept of re-decentralization and what it actually means. But in order to do that, first I'm going to have to give you a very brief history of human civilization. Up until 12,000 years ago, humans lived in small, decentralized communities that operated based on personal trust. Since everyone in a community knew each other, they could personally hold each other accountable in trade and other dealings. Then, a revolution in agriculture changed this by enabling our populations to grow significantly in size. And as a result, people had to fundamentally change the way they lived. For the first time, our people-based trust systems, which worked so effectively for so long, were now being stretched beyond their limits and thus failing. So without a working system of accountability, our societies became less safe, less secure, and bad actors couldn't be held accountable. So to solve this chaos, we transitioned to centralized, top-down governance systems. Now, the benefit of such a system was that instead of having to trust each individual you interacted with, you only had to trust a central authority who was appointed to protect your interests and hold people accountable. And this helped to organize our societies and to manage our growing populations. Naturally, this system concentrated power in the hands of these central authorities, and it created a gap between the governing class and the citizens. So what came from this was inequality, abuse, and corruption. So if we look at a 50,000-year timeline of human history, and we look at this green line, which represents the amount of time in which we lived under decentralized systems, and compare that to the red strip here, which represents our centralized history through today, you'll notice that our decentralized history is significantly longer. So we have this dilemma. Initially, our people-based trust systems failed because they don't scale. So we switched to these authority-based trust systems, which very effectively solved our scaling problem, however, also introduced new bugs into the system because inherently they are inequitable. But the good news is that technology-based trust systems can scale infinitely with a structure that is provably fair. So if we revisit this graph one more time, what I'm suggesting today is that this line will be soon turning green once again. And in the future, when people look back at history, what they will see is that our current era of centralized governance was a temporary phase, a necessary growing pain on our journey as a species to achieving the required technological maturity to manage decentralization at scale. This re-decentralization movement has already begun through the progressive implementation of technology-based trust systems. Technology-based trust systems give us the tools to manage large populations of people at scale. And in the last 600 years, 3 key breakthroughs have made this increasingly possible. They are the printing press, the internet, and the blockchain. Each predecessor has directly paved the way for its successor, and each successor has developed and spread more rapidly than its predecessor. So the printing press served to decentralize the flow of information. And this played a crucial role in our global re-decentralization movement away from monarchy towards democracy. The internet is very interesting because when we look at the history of the internet, we'll notice that it's actually a microcosm of this macro-scale re-decentralization movement. The internet started as a decentralized network of open protocols for connectivity, such as TCP/IP, SMTP, HTTP. And those are still the core technologies that we are all using at every moment for much of our online activity. The web was built as a new layer on top of this foundation. And in the early 90s, with Web 1.0, for the first time, content could be linked together digitally through centralized web-based services, such as Yahoo, AOL, GeoCities, and Google. The individual was incredibly empowered. It was all based on there being no central authority that you had to ask permission, That feeling of individual control is something we've lost. This is a quote from Tim Berners-Lee, widely known as the inventor of the web. So after Web 1.0 came Web 2.0, and that is where we are today, with rich and dynamic content such as social networks and marketplaces. And in Web 2.0, companies such as Facebook, Google, Airbnb, and Uber have built massive data monopolies based on powerful user lock-in that is leveraged to extract rent. This concentration of power on the web is stifling innovation and preventing competition. The web has evolved into an engine of inequity and division. Today, I believe we've reached a typical tipping point, and that powerful change for the better is possible and necessary. That's another quote from Tim Berners-Lee, founder of the web, inventor of the web. So what comes next? Straight ahead of us lies Web 3.0, which is the decentralized web powered by the blockchain. In Web 3, content and programs are linked directly without the use or need for centralized intermediaries. And companies deliver trust to users through verifiability. So how is this new web that is powered by the blockchain going to change our digital lives? First, security. We'll be safer from data breaches like the recent hacks of Equifax and Yahoo, which compromised millions of people around the world. Second, privacy. Without central intermediaries, our private conversations and our online activity will not be held on someone else's servers. Third, transparency. Companies can no longer publicly tell their customers that they are behaving properly while privately breaking the rules and our trust. So we've covered some key ways in which our digital lives are going to be different in this new era of the web. But can the blockchain change the way we live our lives in the so-called physical world on a day-to-day basis? Can it somehow revolutionize the very society that we live in? The simple answer is yes, and that it will in many ways. But there's one area that I want to highlight as where I see the strongest foreseeable impact in our society, and that is in the area of governance. It's rare a new government or central bank gets created, and even more rare to see experimentation with a new form of governance when it does. That's a quote from Fred Ursum, one of the co-founders of Coinbase. Let me explain what Fred is talking about. Blockchains are like economies. And like any economy, they consist of various stakeholders, each with unique and complex needs and wants. And often these stakeholders are actually opposed to one another. Now, unlike the traditional economies of today, which have government bodies and central banks that decide on policy, blockchains are designed with decentralized mechanisms for achieving consensus amongst all members and thus yielding key decisions that way. This mechanism is programmed into the fabric of the protocol. It's programmed into the protocol itself, so it's part of the fabric of how things work. And we can think of this similarly to the way that the political system in a country will determine largely how things go on a day-to-day basis in that country. So Bitcoin is the first and largest implementation of blockchain technology. So as an example, let's take two stakeholders from the Bitcoin network and examine how they are reconciled with one another in a decentralized way. So on one hand, we have the users. And the users use the network to send, receive, and store money. On the other hand, we have the miners. The miners operate the network by carrying out vital tasks for which they are compensated in the form of transaction fees and block rewards. So, users want transaction fees to be as low as possible so that they can send and receive money at little to no cost. However, they need transaction costs to be high enough so that the miners feel incentivized to actually facilitate those transactions and to do so quickly. Now, on the other side, the miners want and would love the transaction fees to be as high as possible so that they can make great money for doing their job. However, at the same time, they need the transaction fees to be low enough so that the users feel incentivized to make transactions and to do so frequently. To put this in perspective, there are an estimated 22 million people using the Bitcoin network today. This is a population larger than countries including Romania, Chile, the Netherlands, Belgium, Portugal, and Greece. So, to organize an economy of 22 million people and to bring them to consensus, people who are spread out all over the world, to bring them to consensus without any form of central authority is a true testament to the power of blockchain. So what's happening in crypto today is that we're taking the science of governance and we're running it through a rapid prototyping process, which has never been possible before in history. One way you can view this is that thousands of different governance models and monetary policies are all being tested out simultaneously on real economies of real people with real money invested in their success. Through this grand experiment, if you will, we will learn more about governance in the next 10 years than we have in the last 100 years. So I've shown you how our society is going to significantly level up its knowledge and its understanding of governance and monetary policy. But I want to bring this back to a more solid point, which is how is this going to significantly make an impact on the way you and I live our lives? This is the beginning of the path towards decentralized governance in all kinds of organizations in our society. Companies, neighborhoods, cities, states, countries. If there's a system out there for organizing people that is performing better than what we're currently using for something as small as a fan club or as large as a nation, people will take notice, and if they feel that it can deliver better performance, they will give it a shot. And whatever delivers superior results wins. Just as software constantly needs to be updated and improved, the way that we organize our societies is no different. So, some of the benefits that we will enjoy in a decentralized world: better transparency, better accountability, stronger security, and a more equitable distribution of power. Or, in other words, it's going to be awesome. Special thanks to these great visionaries who have helped inspire my talk today. Thank you to all of you for being here and listening. Let's connect. These are some places where you can find me, and let's re-decentralize the world. Thank you.
Any questions for Jeremy? Yes, in the back. I'll come to you.
Love. So I want to repeat what I heard because I didn't hear everything. I think your question was regarding DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and whether that will become a new structure for companies. Is that your question? Okay. Yes, I think that one of the very interesting things about decentralized autonomous organizations is that they are not subject to being non-hierarchical and non-human run. They are safe, so to speak, from corruption or inequality or abuse in terms of the way it has happened very often in centralized organizations. And I use organization very loosely because, as I mentioned, that can be a group of 4 people, or it can be a whole nation. The first successful, I would say, decentralized organization is the Bitcoin network itself. If we think about the Bitcoin network, it is a network of 22 million people that is being operated by code, by a protocol. That is incredible. And that is really only the very, very beginning for a long journey ahead of the maturation and the further development of this technology. As I mentioned, all of the various projects that are taking different approaches to the problems that blockchains can solve, and all of the learning that is taking place and all the growth that is taking place at such a rapid pace leads to exponential development and improvement. So I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like because I think it's very early. I think that where we are today in the blockchain, if we speak about it in terms of the internet, it's like 1993 right now, where the internet was a very obscure, user-unfriendly network that was really only catering to software developers and people who were more hardcore into the engineering side of things. It was not a consumer-facing technology yet.
Jeremy. We appreciate it.